boom, according to that, we are live. Welcome, this is Tokyo Tonight. Good to see people already here in the chat. I've got a few topics tonight. In fact, actually, Erin was giving me some tips in terms of editing that I tend to do the things that you all know. I speak really long on the first couple of stories, and then I rush and don't speak enough on the remaining stories to get actual worthwhile cut-out vids out of them. So apparently, yes, I have that problem, as well as the problem that this phone is going to cut out every like 5 minutes, as happened last week. So I'm going to use that as motivation to try to stay more on time. It's not really going to work, is it? It always works out the same, but you never know. You never know. So yeah, anyway, good to see everybody already in the chat. I do actually have a reasonable number of topics this week, so we'll see how I get through it. We've got Dan H, bada boom. Good to have you and Erin as well. Bada bing, bada boom. Yes, thank you. I'm not provoked. I'm not triggered. I am handling. I'm taking therapy. I can get through the butter comments. Good to see Atomic Tom. Good to see you. And very sorry to hear about your laptop. That does suck. Let me bring around the comments here so that they're easier for me to see. Yeah, Quint Ranked, good to see you, Quint Ranked, and good evening all indeed. Remember, if you're coming in, say hello. I love to say hello. It's like how I spend the first part of the show. It's great to see you all. Even if you don't like comment normally, just say hello. It's nice. And if you want to get my attention, do what Andrea did and say my name, Hiko Simon. It pops up orange. Easy to see. AV84, timer start. Yes, AV84K, I should say. Yeah. Well, we know how that's going to go, but that's what we do. Tech issues again, indeed. Butter needed. Yes. All of that stuff. That's all that we have in the comments so far. In fact, you know what? It's on top chat settings, whereas I wanted to show all chat. How do I? Live chat. Oh, that's better. Yeah, top chat. Sometimes it discriminates against people. I miss out comments. So yeah, good to have a devoid from Arizona, as well as 270 AJ. Hi, good to see you. And everybody else, please do say hello. It is good to see you all. Like I say, lots of interesting things to talk about today. Just in terms of what I've been doing, well, it's been pretty much the same. Rainy season's officially started, but it's not that bad at the moment here in Tokyo. The weather's actually still quite nice. It's not too hot. Last night I watched a bit of Netflix for the first time in ages. Just to give my quick reviews, I watched the movie Awake. It's funny, as soon as I started to realize, oh, this movie is really crap, I immediately started looking up Rotten Tomatoes to see, and it was like a 28% rating, and everyone had the same idea that, oh, Awake will put you to sleep, which isn't exactly the problem. It's just dumb. It's not fall asleep. It's just like, how did they end up there? You know, it doesn't. It's got a bit of a B grade thing to it. Not bad, not good, not good. No, you realize about 15 minutes and, oh, this is really not good. So I watched that, and yeah, I felt bad about that. So I started watching the new series of the new season of Master of None. I really loved the first 2 seasons of that, and I couldn't really remember much about it, to tell you the truth. Going into the 3rd season, the first episode of the 3rd season is like, I wouldn't say it's bad, it's good, although I really liked Aziz, and I kind of miss him. He features in the first episode briefly, but he's not the main character. I don't know, it was really heavy. I felt a bit depressed, and I was going through after. I think I was watching after I should have gone to sleep, but I watched a story about the Taj Hotel attack in Bombay in Mumbai a few years ago. I think it's called Mumbai Hotel. I can't even remember the title, but it's actually produced by an Australian company. But it's really good. The movie about the terror attacks on the Mumbai Hotel, the Taj Hotel. Yeah, that was actually a really good movie. It's not getting any promotion, and I guess it appeals to me in a sense because it was a real thing that happened, and I've seen documentaries on it and on those attacks. And don't live. Oh, am I gonna have to reconnect every single time? Oh, that's gonna drive me crazy. I actually have to reconnect every time. Oh, come on. This is going to drive me nuts. Okay, well, anyway, I'll have to keep pinging back on the screen every now and then. Anyway, the movie is good. I should have checked the title before I came in and started the show, but if you just Google it, the movie about the Taj Hotel attacks, that was quite good. That was about that. Really, I've just been watching YouTube stuff other than that. So, yeah. I guess we're ready to go. So if no one else is here saying hello, oh, there are more people in there. So boom. Andrea says that a friend of yours will be traveling to Tokyo for the Paralympics in August. She's a physio. Well, good for her. I will, as much as I really don't like talking about the Olympics, there are some stories about it, so I will be covering it tonight. But yeah. There are 90,000 staff, including people like physios coming to the Olympics. And yeah, they will have to stay in the village and in their accommodation. They won't be able to travel around very much, but it's great that she made it here anyway. I mean, it's been, after all the dramas, Tudom. Thumbs up. Good to thank you for the thumbs up. Appreciate it. Andrea Moboy watched The Good Liar on Netflix. It was a pretty good film. Oh, that's a good tip. That rings a bell as well. That strikes me as the sort of thing I should check out. So anyway, thank you for the recommendation. Clank Gun 72. Ooh, good timing. Hey yo, and good timing indeed. I'm just about to start. You made it just in time. Tokyo 503. Happy Father's Day to all dads out there. Hotel Mumbai. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for checking that. And yes, all the dads, and your dads. You know, if you're a dad or have a dad, happy Father's Day. In New Zealand, I actually realized today. Apparently, in New Zealand, it's in September, but most countries it's today. So yeah, I don't know why New Zealand went with September, and I know I'm totally going to forget it if it's like if it's then. So I called up my dad today and I said, hey, just for September, I'm saying it today because otherwise I'll forget. But yeah. Quinn Rankid mentions there's one athlete that arrived in Japan had some variant of COVID. Indeed, one of the Uganda team athletes, so like 9 people who came in, they all had been vaccinated with the AstraZeneca vaccine, and but on arrival, one of them did test positive, so was going to go into isolation there and receive treatment, I suppose. And the others are all going to their accommodation, which is actually not in the athlete villages. They're going sort of, I think, to a camp outside of Tokyo, but they're going to have to stick to their hotel and whatever. So a good thing they came in early. Again, I mean, look, people get picked up at the airport, every day with COVID. So this is the first case involving someone coming to the Olympics. It's not clear if it was actually an athlete or if it was a staff member, but yeah, we're going to see a lot more cases like this. And we'll see how it goes, but this is the deal that we've got. So yeah, and indeed, people were not expecting the Olympics to happen at all. Yeah, the way that the government's handled it is they've just pretty much just done it so as it will just happen, whether people sort of choose. They just sort of made it so it was impossible for there to be anything else. So yeah. So that said, let's get into the sorry, Andrea's saying something. She had to obviously have vaccine like other athletes. Yes. And I think most countries are vaccinating their athletes before they come. Of course, it's not 100%, as in this case, the athlete in question apparently was vaccinated. But yeah, I think they're doing the responsible thing. So okay, that's interesting. So just around the Olympic Village, which won't be too fancy, but still, it's a good opportunity for them. Yeah. Anyway, into it. Let's get into the topics. It is 10:40. Let's see if I can stick to my 5-minute, or the screen will go boom. It will actually explode. You will lose the connection. So yeah, maybe before I do this, actually, just one thing. I took down my Gen TV. It was running up like monthly server bills and everything, and I wasn't able to maintain it. And frankly, I think if you use the YouTube Premium and you can download stuff, like that's how I've been watching most YouTube lately. So yeah, it was really fun building it. It was a good exercise. So you may see the MyChan logo still pop up on the screen, but I have actually shut down the operation of the site. So for those of you wondering, but I do appreciate all of the support with that, and I would like to do another project like that again sometime. But anyway, first topic, alcohol. This came out like 47 minutes ago. Kyoto News announced that alcohol will be allowed in the dormitories in the athletes village and so on, but no condoms will be distributed. The thinking behind this, obviously it doesn't make sense, but let's talk about the logic behind it. The idea is that by giving out condoms, because they're telling all of the athletes that they will be required to socially distance, obviously it's sending the wrong message. If you're handing out condoms, it's like you're encouraging them to not leave enough room for the baby Jesus in between all of the people. They're not so it's like sending a mixed message against, thinking about prioritizing the anti-COVID measures and social distancing. They don't want to imply that there is an okay. to shake hands with your private parts. So they decided that they have these 150,000 condoms that they'll let people take home as souvenirs, maybe blow up balloons for the kids, who knows. I imagine they've got something figured out, but they are going to allow alcohol to be in the room. So you're just basically going to have a Catholic high school prom scenario of lots of kids trapped together in a space with alcohol and no contraception. And if my recollections of high school are true, that usually won't go to plan. Some people are suggesting perhaps this is a scientific experiment. Maybe they're trying to create some kind of X-Men from having all of the athletes drunk and locked up in a dormitory with no prophylactics. Another possibility, I suppose, is it's some kind of scientific experiment. I mean, it would be a lot nicer than that Stanford University experiment where they let them be prison guards with one another. But again, who knows? Who knows what they're really trying to do here? I think there's a lot of conflicting good intentions that are just resulting in a tornado of that's not going to work out well. But it will be interesting to watch anyway. So yeah, that's the first story. There goes the screen. I'm going to have to do this every 5 minutes. It's a good timer. Screen come back. Screen come back. Oh, this will make your editing easy, Aaron. Whenever it fades out, I'm just going to end the topic. Come on. Really? Is this how it's going? I've got to fix that other iPhone that has the never shutting down screen. Oh, in fact, is the screen capture software shut down? This is technical issues. It's a feature. It's not a bug. Although this really is kind of a bug, I must admit. This is bugging me. What's happening here? Come on, my Wi-Fi is connected. My Wi-Fi is connected, so that should be popping up. So I can only assume that I need to reboot. Yeah, that I need to reboot my screen capture stuff. Condoms would have been lovely gifts. Well, I think that's what they're telling them to use them for at the moment. But yeah, just add butter to the screen. Thank you, Andrea. That's very relaxing as a message. Boom. We're back. We're back. We should be back. Are we back? Please be back. Here it comes. Air server. Okay, so that's the first story. Yeah, well, this is good. I am actually going to make sure that I finish the story as soon as the 5-minute timer goes. I'll wrap it up elegantly, and then I'll fall into a panic after every story. So you're going to have perfect editing like bookmarks, and you'll be able to see the actual background changing. So, Aaron, this will be the easiest to edit video ever. Good. Okay, I've now got 5 minutes to talk about the next subject. Clank Gun 72, I suspect that you're right. This could actually be beneficial. I'm already moving to the second story, and it's 10:45. This never happens. Second story. Second story is actually, there's a few stories here together. So, okay, this is complicated because some of these I want to tell as part of an overall story of multiple stories. So this is where I get a long thing, but I guess I'll try to break it up. Or at least I'll probably do a couple run together. So anyway, let's dive in and see how we go. The first thing I want to mention, hey Tawaiwai, good to see. Yes, and Thomas H, also good to see you there in the chat. And the J Vlog, oops, late, no problem. We're just getting into the second one. You just missed out on the Olympic alcohol and withholding of condoms. So yes. Vaccinations are interesting. Here's a graph right now of doses administered per 100 people, and as you can see, Japan is not. China and South Korea are still higher than Japan. In fact, no, this won't jump to the other graph. But as you can see, Japan's gone. That red line down the bottom, it's gone from being terrible to going pretty well. It's been late, but it is accelerating, and it is continuing to accelerate for the reasons I'm about to show. So. It's funny, this is what happens when a government realizes in mid-May that they are going to be kicked out of power if they don't actually do something about making sure that people can get vaccinated, given that it feels like the government had abandoned the country ahead of the Olympics and whatnot. And right now, I can speak for myself as well. I got a heads up the other day from work that these work vaccinations, I'm going to be able to get one of those. So we actually have multiple options coming up right now. and I'll go through what those are. But if you're in Tokyo anyway, the first is that the mass vaccination centers for 10,000 people a day in Otemachi being done by the self-defense forces. Turns out that people, as I mentioned last week, some of them are only 20% of the capacity is actually being booked by elderly. Most elderly don't want to travel to the center city of Tokyo to get a vaccination. They just want to do it locally. So they are choosing to do that, and the result is that, they've got all of this capacity free that's not being used. So the government said, screw it. Okay, everyone over 18 can book a vaccination in Otemachi if they want it, or they can do it locally when that becomes available. But the point is, for most people under 65, you still can't make reservations for vaccinations yet. So if you have a voucher from your local city council and you live in Tokyo, you can book for Otemachi right now and go and get a shot like this week, which is awesome, except I live in one of the 14, there are 14 districts, so there are 9 districts in Tokyo that have not handed out vouchers to under 65-year-olds yet, and I live in one of those, so I don't have my voucher with my vaccination number that they need to check off to give me, to allow me to make a reservation in Otemachi, so I can't go. But if you're lucky enough to live in one of the 14 districts in Tokyo that has issued vouchers to people under 65, you can go and book your mass vaccination center Moderna shot. And good for you. You should totally go and do that if you do that. If not, you're in the same situation as your next option, which is the option I have, it turns out, is many companies are going to be issuing. The government said that they've got this stockpile of Moderna vaccines, and they've said they'll give them to any company that can take care of vaccinating their employees and their households themselves. They will just give for free the vaccines to the companies, and the companies will use their own company doctors to administer them. So you have cases like SoftBank has said, we'll take 250,000 vaccines and we will vaccinate all of our employees as well as their households, as well as Masayoshi Son has also promised to vaccinate subcontractors and support people and people in towns around SoftBank facilities. So actually, again, a lot of the heavy lifting, and right now the airlines have already started vaccinating their employees, and I'm going to be able to do that at work, hopefully within a couple of weeks. Hopefully this week I'll get the details on that, but I can get a Moderna shot and just as effective as the Pfizer one. So I'm just going straight for that. And you don't need the voucher to do the company vaccinations. So basically, with all of these companies that have gone and taken up the government offer of being able to vaccinate all their employees, which of course then means you can go back to the office and stuff like that. And that is just about to start. That line is going to go up even more vertically. So actually, we're already at 1 million shots a day. And with the corporate vaccinations, it's probably going to get way ahead of that. So I think we're going to get to a point very, very soon where everybody who, the government promised that everyone who wants to be vaccinated will be able to have been vaccinated by November. And the rate things are going, it could be sooner than that. It could actually be October. But what's interesting is that unlike in other countries where they talk about with the vaccine rollout, like in America, they've been doing it for a long time, and they're very focused on getting to 70%, getting to herd immunity. In a lot of countries are sort of focusing on how do we get 70% of the population, remembering that kids can't get vaccinated, and a certain percentage of the population for various reasons like allergies and whatnot also might not be able to be vaccinated. So you got to have 70% of the population, excluding all the people that can't be vaccinated, including those people. So you really need practically everybody who can be vaccinated to be vaccinated in order for the vaccine to actually work, the same way that you have with the mumps vaccinations that they give babies. They make it mandatory in many countries, like in New Zealand, to have the mumps rubella shots, because that's the only way you make sure that the disease is eliminated. Otherwise, it's always going to spread around in the community, and there's always going to be a risk. So I know America's confronting that. Japan isn't really confronting that yet, because right now the issue in Japan is the people who want vaccines and can't get it are freaking out, and the government's afraid of them. So it's focusing on making sure everyone who wants vaccines can get it, and they're focusing on the voluntary aspect. They're focusing on the aspect that these corporate vaccinations are for people who want them. Of course, you have multiple options. You can get it from your local city council, you can get it from the Self-Defense Forces office, you can get it from your company, or you can decide if you're not actually required to get it. And there's no real pressure to go get it at the moment. They're just giving you the options. However, the discussion that is starting to happen in Japan is the discussion in this kind of left-wing newspaper, the Tokyo Shimbun. 打たない自由はない。接種はそういう努力義務なのに差別偏見 Basically, Achirokutuka, they're talking about the idea that people who are hesitant, who do not want to get vaccinated or are not sure about it, feel like they are under pressure and may be subject to discriminatory sanction if they do not get vaccinated, even though they have their own reasons for not doing it. And it's starting to raise an interesting question. If you have the workplace vaccinations and then you go back to work, I'm sure in a country like Japan, there are going to be companies that are going to say people who are not vaccinated will not be allowed to come back to work, or you'll need proof of vaccination to be able to come back into the office or something like that, or you'll need to take special measures. Like I say, people will be singled out or treated differently. And accompanying this as well, I should also point out the government has decided that from September they will start issuing paper document-based vaccine passports, indicating that people as proof that people have been vaccinated. The idea being that most countries are going to reopen international travel on the basis that you have proof that you've been vaccinated for that. And of course, a lot of countries are also looking at setting up, as well as Japan is setting up a digital passport system for tracking, basically carrying evidence that you've been vaccinated, which can be used for reopening travel. And Japan is keen for that, both ways travel, frankly. So they're setting up that framework from July. But of course, there are countries like Israel that have made used vaccine passports for things like going to the movies and restaurants and so on as well. And it's not really clear what the application of that's going to be, but people who are hesitant are worried that they are going to face discrimination for not getting vaccinated. And they're questioning while everyone is still emphasizing that the vaccinations are voluntary, will they be discriminated against? And it's kind of tough. Certainly, I think it's legitimate to actually have different rights based upon vaccinations. And this is totally normal. When I lived in Singapore as a kid, the whole family had to have malaria vaccinations before we went to Singapore. That was mandatory. I grew up in New Zealand. We have mandatory shots as babies. They're not actually mandatory in Japan, by the way. And there is a history in Japan. There have been some cases of, I think it was the HPV vaccines, that they had a bad batch that caused people illness and whatnot. So they've had some bad experiences in Japan, which increases the sort of, it's not so much a pure anti-vax. It's not people believe it's going to give them 5G. It's just people not sure whether they really want to inject something if it's not put to them in a way that that you have to do it. So this is the thing. It really makes me wonder how far, while it's great that right now the availability of vaccines is going through the roof in Japan, and after being very slow getting started, it is very, very good that now I'm looking forward myself to hopefully getting my first shot. And it's Moderna, so it's 4 weeks apart, but hopefully in the next couple of weeks, and then maybe before August, perhaps even, I could be, fully vaccinated. I'm looking forward to that, but there's a question about how far in Japanese society is that going to reach, and is it going to be like America, where you're going to have to start having like free guns in order to free ammo, or all the sort of gimmicks that they're using to incentivize people to get vaccinated, frankly, which is to be responsible. But there again, obviously, social responsibility is not a big motivator for a lot of people. My personal view on this is that I certainly don't think it's appropriate just to bully or harass people, or, bullying is not justified for anybody, even if they did something bad. We have this reflex. It's a human reflex. It exists in Japan just the same as in Western countries. But I do feel like in countries like New Zealand and America, the sort of Protestant sort of culture colonized countries, or that have that foundation, there is this kind of self-righteous entitlement to be a bigot that we have, the idea that you have so many people who feel like who used biblical justification for mistreating black people, or for discriminating violently against gay people and so on, and they use religious justification for it. It's like they have a green light to be bullies. And the thing is, even if someone is an actual convicted criminal, say you have someone at your work who has a criminal conviction, that doesn't entitle you to bully them. I mean, there might be restrictions on employment, that they might, have certain obligations to society. They might have to report to a parole officer, but you're not entitled to bully them. And I think it's the same. I don't think it's appropriate to, I think it's fair to be concerned about policing, social bullying of people who choose not to be vaccinated. But at the same time, I also think it's totally fine for there to be, safety-based discrimination on what people who cannot be vaccinated or choose not to be vaccinated can do. And I think there needs to be a switch in messaging to emphasizing the goal of getting to 70% rates. And if nothing else, if social responsibility doesn't motivate you, which it should, but it doesn't really nowadays, then what I think should motivate you is the things that will happen to you if you get it. And I know that there's so many people who talk kind of like, if there's kind of a thing that, yes, it's largely only fatal for people who are like above 50 or who are obese or have diabetes or cases like that. So sort of preconditions. So if you're like under 50 and reasonably healthy or whatever, I know a lot of people think it won't happen to them, but even young people who catch it, the cases, I mean, again, it messes up your blood and the organs that depend on your blood, and it's now been established it shrinks parts of the brain that affect smell. You can lose your sense of smell. You can lose your memory or your ability to retain memories. It can cause you basically brain damage. People end up needing dialysis. It can mess up the kidneys and the liver. People lose the ability to sleep, to taste. They lose their memory. And, it goes on for years after. So even people who have mild cases of COVID, like, it's a scary, I mean, I would get vaccinated. It's not so much that I'm afraid of dying from it. It's really, well, it's two things for me. I don't want to be responsible for passing it on to other people that obviously could have life endangering, but it's not just the life endangering things, it's everything else. Respiratory problems, brain problems, kidney problems, the long term. The hair loss doesn't scare me so much, but that's another thing again. I don't think that there's so much emphasis. I think the media is playing so much that, one person in every 100,000 has blood clots from the AstraZeneca, and everyone stops wanting to get shots in places like Australia and the UK, when, they should be spending more time focusing on why the other 10,000 people really should get the shot, which is this. The consequences are pretty awful. So, the news is doing a little bit of it, but that's why I'm going to get vaccinated. So the vaccine passports and, that's what's going on at the moment. Certainly it's great that there are more vaccinations, and the question is, how far is it going to go? How much is hesitancy going to come into it? I'm going to jump into the comments. I've been flipping around, so it hasn't, the screen hasn't died. But back into the comments anyway. I see some new people joining, so let me see if I can go back far enough to catch everyone. Tokyo 503, I think I said hello to before. Odie Jr. indeed brings the boom, as always. Good to see you. Tawaiwai, I think I just said hello to before. Boom, I'm just going for names. Ko Hoshino, good to see you again. Good to have you back in the last few episodes. Good to see you. Thomas H, indeed, still talking about condoms up here, so I know I've got a bit too far back. We've got Guys English World, good to see you. Good evening. Shubas, late again, but no worries. Good to have our person in Panama. Buenos dias, buenos tardes. I guess buenos dias for you. Question for you, Shubas. How is the Spanish accent in Panama, is it like close to Colombia, or is it like Venezuela, or like what's it close to? I don't know what the Panamanian Spanish accent sounds like. I've been listening to Malua lately. And I must admit, it's kind of like the Colombian accent. I didn't really know it, but I've been kind of picking it up from his. I find it a lot easier than the Caribbean accents to understand. I majored in Spanish at university. When I went to Argentina, man, I was in Spain for 3 months, and then I went to Argentina. I love the Argentinian accent, but I couldn't understand a word they were saying down there. Anyway, good to see you. Good morning. Sergeant Bilko, good to see you. Carrots are working. Andrea Mowe, yeah, injections are working. PB, sheep. Yay, sheep. Good to see. Thank you for the sheep emoji. That perks me up. We've got who else in here? I think that's all the people. Milchman too. Good to see you. Thank you for waving the hand. Also, the J-Vlog, first vaccination, yakiniku, second vaccination, a ticket to the Upskirt Cafe. I'm not sure that that's socially, given that I'm doing it out of a sense of social responsibility, I think that would cancel it out more than I would. No, that wouldn't really be a good thing to do. Also, I've heard after the second shot that you really do get knocked out quite badly. I've heard that now I'm having family members in Australia and New Zealand get them. My dad got the Pfizer one, and the second one really knocked him out. My stepfather in Australia got the he got the AstraZeneca one, and the first one, apparently that one knocks you out. And they both basically just slept for a day, which sounds wonderful, but it means I'm going to take that into account when I schedule my shots. Yeah, AV84K. They say it's probably they'll say that it's not more deadly than the flu, probably. Yeah. I mean, people say lots of things for this, but yeah. Sure, but Spanish accent is close to Colombia, not much like Mexico. Yeah, it's an interesting accent. I like the sound of it. As an English speaker, the Mexican accent of Spanish is actually very friendly. It's very easy, like the pronunciation is quite close to English, so it's easy to Spanglish. More than the way that the Colombian, you don't drop the s's like the Caribbeans do, but yes, but it's kind of cool. It's not overdone. So yeah, it's a nice accent. Good stuff. Anyway, next story. Boom. So the vaccine numbers, how are we doing in Tokyo? Well, the Delta variant, now we're not using, the China virus and the England virus and the India virus anymore, which I'm glad. It's a little bit tiresome and stupid to be focusing on where it came from when frankly it's just something that's here. But the Delta variant is increasing. It was really the reason that Osaka was so much worse than Tokyo was that it was more widespread down there, but the cases in Tokyo are increasing, and like in other countries where it's popping up, like in the UK, it is driving. Although the numbers have been going down slowly over a period of time, and we've gotten down to like 300 something cases a day. We had today 376 cases, up from 304 on Sunday last week, i.e. 72. It's up 72 cases week on week on the same day. And more people are going out because the numbers are coming down. The government also announced the other day that since numbers are coming down so much, and totally not because it's almost the Olympics, they are going to exit the state of emergency and go into the extended set of health measures, where there'll still be limited restrictions, but it won't be a full-blown state of emergency, i.e. all is well in the school, is what the Prime Minister is saying. But of course, the Prime Minister also saying, but of course, we're very worried about a rebound. Well, the rebound started happening this week. Week on week, the case numbers started going up again in Tokyo, and not dramatically, although today was kind of dramatic, at least week on week, like percentage-wise, going up 72 from 305, that's like nearly 25%, right? So, yeah, I mean, we've never had a lockdown here in Tokyo. It's all been voluntary, and I appreciate the way that it's worked like that. It feels like whenever I talk to family in Australia in particular, just everything down there seems like so crazy. Like, one person coughs sideways and they lock down. Queensland has become like an independent country, where they're even blocking interstate movement now, and like the lockdowns in Melbourne and so on sound awful. But I mean, credit to you. The result is that you've kept really close to zero cases. We've been a lot more chill with hundreds of cases here in Tokyo. I don't know if that's a good thing, but I do feel like it's made it more manageable. But yeah, it's already going up again, and we are still under restrictions. Like most restaurants are still closed at night, and they're talking about reopening them. And you have the Olympics about to start. So yeah, the government's concern that Tokyo's in for a rebound are, I think, valid, and I'm worried about them as well. And if they're really worried about a rebound, honestly, they shouldn't be loosening up the restrictions on restaurants and whatnot at the moment. So we'll see next week, when I do the show next week, how things are going. But given how quickly, after the last state of emergency ended, we were back in a new one within 4 weeks. And we're 4 weeks from the Olympics right now, which would be bad timing. I actually feel like they should just keep the state of emergency on. I don't see how it does any good to be lifting it, especially now that we have the scary Delta variant increasing here that looks way more contagious. So we'll see. Anyway, I am getting the hell in. I am going and getting that shot, the vaccination, as soon as I can get it, because it's not, it's not getting safer. The variants are getting more scary. So that's the thing that's happening here in Tokyo. Shubis, you're in lockdown there on Sundays. I didn't realize that you could catch it on other, that you couldn't catch it on Saturdays or Mondays. Well, you know what? That's exactly the same in Tokyo. They force the restaurants to close at 8 p.m. and everyone points out, what? So you can't catch COVID-19 at 7 p.m. The idea is they're trying to discourage people from going to restaurants by making them close early, so people cancel their plans. But of course, people are just piling into the restaurants earlier, and it's not exactly very logical. But there we go, like Shubis there. Guys, English World, do I know Joe Rogan? I don't know. He was the one, but there was one thumbnail that said he does. I do not know Joe Rogan. Somebody, I don't know if they said that I look like Joe Rogan or something. I saw somebody talking the other week about that they thought they saw me on one of his videos, or maybe on the Talking Heads. No, have not had the pleasure. I've only seen a few of his videos. I see different opinions. Seems fine to me. I mean, I like watching UFC and stuff like that. I know him from that. No. He's a good-looking man. What can I say? He looks a lot like me. Quinn Rankid, you disagree. It's a good idea to focus on where it comes from, but it may because it may lead to ways to prevent it in the future. Well, yeah, I mean, you're entitled to disagree. I mean, certainly when people try to figure out the origin of it and how to prevent it, I don't think that they'll need to actually tag it with the label India. And India doesn't really help. Neither does China. You know, like China's an enormous country. And in terms of like reacting to it, the problem is, of course, you know, kids in school grounds, you know, suddenly beating up all the Indian kids or the Chinese kids, you know, isn't helpful for the scientific investigation into which part of India it came from or how it mutated. I don't think you need to call it the India, you know, or the UK variant as well. You know, I don't think you need to be broadly associating it with a nationality for that purpose. The geographic thing, I do agree that the origin and the root cause should absolutely be properly scientifically investigated. But I don't know that you need to actually stigmatize like entire nations of people and ethnicities of people that aren't even connected to those nations with the labels like that. That's my opinion. But yeah. AV84K, your country, what country is that, by the way? Which country are you in? Your country will remove most restrictions at the end of the month, including mask wearing, where 1.5 meters social distance is possible. Don't know if that's smart with the new Delta variant. Yeah. I don't know what country you're in. Japan, I can't really imagine that we're going to stop wearing masks here, especially knowing that there's so many people that are not going to get vaccinations anyway. I think I'm definitely going to be wearing a mask. Certainly on the trains, and certainly walking around, maybe in the office if I know everyone in my team is vaccinated and if the company rules allow that. But Netherlands, okay. Yeah, Japan already had a mask wearing culture anyway, so I really have a feeling like it's going to be here to stay. It's going to be, but we'll see. I don't get the feeling that Japan is rushing to get rid of masks in the same way that maybe America and European countries were, where it was a bit more of an alien thing to do. Here it's actually quite a normal thing to do anyway, and I think it's going to stick for a while, but we'll see. Anyway, interesting times. I'm going to go to the next story. You know what? It's 11:08, and I've gotten through 2 stories, so I am on my normal timing. What can I do? Who knows? Like, it could be. I would probably have more money. So, yeah, that would be nice. It's not the case. I think I mentioned this the other week. Just to quickly update, there was the story about how they were chopping the branches off the trees at Yoyogi Park in order to allow 35,000 people to come in and watch the Olympics on a big screen altogether if they couldn't get tickets to the events. Yeah, it would have been a great idea in 2020 with no COVID, but with 2021 and the pandemic and the state of emergency and everything still happening like that, I think Rochelle started a petition about this that got a lot of media attention. Rochelle Kopp started a petition that got all this media attention. And I don't know if it was the petition itself that actually, or the coverage of the petition that caused the governor to think, instead of having that as a place to watch, is to gather 35,000 people and watch the Olympics, we really should use that as a mass vaccination site. At the end of the day, that was the plan. There were 5 public viewing spots around Tokyo in different areas where large groups of people could gather, and the plan was to have large screens and basically things like sports stadiums where you could watch the Olympics without having to be in the main sports stadiums. But of course, these would be cluster sites, and they would be packed full of people. And the fact that Yoyogi Park doesn't allow groups of more than 5 people to go into the park right now, but they were planning to allow 35,000 people, I made fun of that. Rochelle didn't like the idea of pruning for the Olympics, pruning for the purpose of doing something harebrained and irresponsible. I was okay with the pruning. I don't care about pruning 35 trees out of 20,000 in Yoyogi Park. But yeah, the idea of just how stupid it was that you would have the public viewing still going on. And it looks like, the governor recognized that. And so congrats to her. This is not one to edit or save for a video. It's just an update. But they've decided to cancel all of the public viewing sites and convert them into mass vaccination sites run by the Tokyo Metropolitan Government. So that's a good achievement. I'm just going to jump straight to the next story. So Korea relations have been interesting this week. There have been actually 2 stories. Oh, did I not include the other one? So I'm just going to tell the one Korea story as well. Yeah, the Korean drama, I always had a policy for a time when it was getting really crazy that I just stopped talking about it because there's nothing really good to talk about. And I know that if you're watching this from Korea, Of course, all your coverage and perspectives are going to be totally different to mine, and mine are influenced totally by the fact I'm here in Japan and I process media from Japan. And as much as I think that the media here is that I get good information here, sure, I've got a perspective that's pro-Japanese, and I acknowledge that, and I admit to that before I give my update on this. But at the same time, listen, I preface this that I think Korea and Japan should, of course, get along. But the fact that at the G7, the Korean president came along, and there's still the problems going on with the two. There are two big court cases at the moment in South Korea, where there's one involving the workers, the wartime. I'll use the worst terminology for it, just to make it clear. I'm not being ambiguous about the wrongs that are involved. The sex slaves and the slave laborers. Now, the slave laborers, the conscripted labor, of course, this happened in many countries. Hey, thanks, Kohosh, but, they were, as well as people in Japan being forced to work in war production factories, people in Korea, which was incorporated into Japan, but they didn't feel like they were Japanese, and they were also getting conscripted to go and work in Japanese factories. And those people and their families are still seeking compensation from Japanese companies that are the successor companies of the companies that benefited from the wartime labor. And on those, in the case for the compensation from those companies, the Korean courts, the most recent decisions have been that while lower courts said yes, those companies, the Korean government should seize the assets of those Japanese successor companies and sell them to pay compensation to Korean war laborers. The most recent court decision is that actually the 1965 diplomatic relations treaty between South Korea and Japan, they agreed that individual claims will be expunged, and all matters relating to the colonial period and the wartime period between Korea and Japan will be resolved on a country-to-country basis through the huge compensation package that Japan paid as part of the 1965 treaty. I.e. that, and that basically took away the right of individuals to sue Japan or directly or anything relating to the colonial period, and that those matters should be resolved government to government. And what happened was that when the courts said that it would be against public policy to block their lawsuits, and they started allowing these things, Japan's protest was, hey, the treaty that establishes the whole basis for our diplomatic relations says that we'll handle this diplomatically, we'll agree on how to handle this. We won't, you won't start taking Japanese companies through the courts. The Korean government said that no, we have to respect what the courts say. We're a constitutional democracy. We can't overrule our courts. So we're sorry, you're just going to have to suck it up. So in a way, the recent court decision affirming the 1965 treaty kind of brought sanity back, because Japan was ready to pull out all Japanese business and ties from South Korea over this, because it's like, how can they do business over there if they thought they were operating there free of risk of litigation for this, and now they are. The other one, of course, is the sex slave, the comfort woman case, which also had a finding this week where in that case the courts are inclined still to hold the Japanese government, not companies, directly liable. And actually I believe the District Court of Seoul actually put a request to the Japanese government from the District Court of Seoul saying, Japanese government, we'd like you to provide us with a list of all of your assets in Korea so that we can prepare to confiscate them and sell them as compensation for the comfort woman. Japan government has the same position on that as well, that based on the 65 treaty, it has to be sorted out government to government. And Japan 3 times has done deals with the South Korean government to arrange compensation to be paid to the comfort women. And every time the South Koreans changed their minds after doing the deal, including the last deal, which they agreed would be the final solution, which is a terrible way of describing it, but the final, the final resolution of the problem. And that president who did that was very unpopular for it, and the next government disowned it. But from the Japanese government perspective, it was like the 3rd time they had resolved it, and now they're getting sued in the courts over it again. And again, so the Japanese government's just like, you guys are crazy. And this is partly why when the Korean president was sitting next to the Japanese prime minister at the G7, the Koreans wanted to set up a discussion between the two presidents, the president and the prime minister. And the prime minister said, no way, Jose, we have nothing to talk about. And the Koreans responded, apparently this is actually an annual thing, though. In fact, I think they even do this twice a year. Again, the Americans want South Korea and Japan to get along because, South Korea and Japan are both American allies. They are both strong militaries. They both have the same enemies of China, Russia, North Korea. And they're both democracies and so on. And America wants them both to cooperate with U.S. forces for defending the entire region. The problem is that every year, twice a year, South Korean military holds defense drills around what they call Dokdo Island, what Japan calls Takeshima Islands, preparing war games for fighting a war against Japan. Twice a year, the South Korean government, they're surrounded by North Korea, China, and Russia, and yet twice a year their military prepares for war with Japan. On the basis that in 1953 the Koreans took these islands, which they believe are historically theirs, but were being occupied by Japan at the time. After World War II, the Americans designated that these were Japanese territory, but while Japan was disarmed, and as soon as GHQ pulled out, the moment they pulled out, the Koreans took over the islands by force and actually shot and killed a whole bunch of Japanese fishermen from Shimane Prefecture and so on around. Like 150 fishermen have been killed by Korean Coast Guard and military around these islands. So for the Japanese, the Koreans are upset that the Japanese won't relinquish their claim to the island, which from the Japanese perspective, these islands were stolen and people were murdered, and so no, Japan doesn't have plans to invade the islands or take them back. I mean, they're just a bunch of rocks. It's kind of stupid. It's just a national symbol for the Koreans, but at the same time, they're not going to acquiesce to the whole thing because people died over it, and from their perspective, the Koreans just stole them, which is, by the way, the same perspective that the Koreans have that the Japanese did in 1904. So everyone's looking at each other badly on this, but the fact that, amidst all of these problems, Korea is still carrying out annual war games, preparing for war with Japan, while Japan just totally doesn't give a shit and is just looking across like, what's your problem? This is why things will never get better, unfortunately, and I really wish that they would. I wish there was a way for it to happen, but it can't, and the problem is if the South Korean government does want to improve things with Japan, it'll happen just like with Park, they'll end up in jail. It'll actually be political suicide, which in Korea can mean actual suicide. I mean, look at President Roh. Basically, every single president, Lee did a deal with Japan, ended up in jail. Park did a deal with Japan, ended up in jail. Roh didn't do a deal with Japan, but he killed himself, so I guess he never got around to it. I mean, every president there ends up like this. So I don't talk about Korea. I like BTS. Great food, better food than Japanese food, if you ask me. Love traveling there, love the people, love the culture, but nothing going to happen there in terms of relations with Japan. Into the comments. Atomic Tom, wasn't there a lot of oil around those islands? You are mixing them up with the Senkaku Islands, which are on a gas field, or basically they cause an economic zone overlap, which has a gas field on both sides with China. So that's China. These rocks have some halibut and nothing else. The Americans use them for a bombing range. The Lion Court rocks serve no purpose whatsoever other than giving Korean nationalists something to thump their chests about. And Japan just doesn't care. So, I mean, they don't care enough to do anything about it, but they care enough to not let the Koreans have the satisfaction of Japan giving up on claiming and having a Takeshima Day every year just to point out, those are still ours and you stole them and you killed a bunch of our people for it. So it's a mess, isn't it? Quickly looking back at the comments, stigmatizing people is bad. So is burying head in the sand. Oh, I agree. Burying people in the head in the sand is. And I don't think people are pretending that it doesn't come from a place. I think the scientific inquiry is needed, but I don't think that telling the whole population to blame the country for it is helpful either. But I certainly agree that absolutely it should be fully investigated. What I worry is that the stigmatization is actually undermining the scientific inquiry. It's like when you have these cases in Australia where they actually dox the people who get COVID. They say that this nightclub owner, who went to several strip bars and, the whole society. Of course, then the next person's not going to say that they went to a bunch of strip bars, which means that they won't find out, those people at the other strip bars are going to get it and they won't know how they got it. Because the first person will be embarrassed and afraid of getting doxxed. And it's a little bit like that if you mishandle it. It doesn't mean that you should be covering it up, but you should actually be creating the right conditions for the scientists to go and find out what the hell happened, which, the moment you make it political, it all just goes to hell, which is why using Delta for me is the right thing to do. But certainly, I completely agree with you, Quint, that we shouldn't be hiding it up. I could be an American alter ego. Who knows? Believe in yourself. Good to see you. But in other words, thinking thoughts that belong on the toilet serves no purpose. Very philosophical. Yes, I can agree with that. J-Log, here in Sasuba last year, they stopped the main fireworks, did random unannounced talents so that people could watch from home. It was a good idea. I'm glad to hear that. Korean food is very, very good. Yes, I'm glad that you're with me on that, Aaron. And Maddie, good to see you. Dab. Good to see you. Next topic, Toshiba. The fallout from that, there's actually a New York Times article, which, I wasn't able to save on here, but it basically said, the Japanese government invited foreign investors to invest in Japan, and then Japanese companies basically, pushed them back into the ocean, is the take on this. Of course, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry has said that, they totally weren't cooperating with Toshiba to block an activist U.S. capital investment firm, activist shareholders, from participating in the shareholders meeting last year. They were doing it because there were concerns about the security of Japanese sensitive technology. Hey, Mig Zivim, good to see you. It's definitely all New Zealand's fault. I'm pretty sure whatever it is, it'll ultimately come back to us. The Toshiba thing is just an update from last week that they're still saying it wasn't their fault. This is a dumb story. It's a continuation of a dumb story I've covered in the past. You recall that I've talked about how some schools in Japan have rules still about there's the famous ones about the hair color and about the underwear color and stuff like that. Rules that students are not allowed to be dating, and the idea that if a teacher or someone from the staff or even a parent sees a student outside of the school that looks like they're on a date, they can report them to the school and they can be suspended from school for being seen at the movies on a date on a weekend. Rules like that. But of course, even more even worse, the rules on things like underwear needing to be white, that so many schools in Japan, actually quite widespread, have rules like this. But apparently what happens as a result is that some teachers of elementary school students feel like, they're entitled to do underwear inspections of the girls. Combine the creepiness of that with the fact that Japan has no sex offender register, and the fact that even people who are convicted of sex crimes, it came up last year that many of them were easily finding ways of getting employed. There's no background checks. And to the extent there's a risk of being outed by somebody who knows what you're doing, they just change their name or do something like that. And a lot of sex offenders, in fact, offenders who were sex offenders against students as teachers who went to jail for it, were getting back into the teaching profession and teaching. The Ministry of Education says that they're trying to tidy that one up, but you combine that with the fact that schools have rules that allow teachers to inspect, boys and girls' underwear. This led to a lot of bad things. And even where it didn't lead to bad things, it's just a stupid look. And parents, a lot of people have started saying, why are these rules necessary? Particularly prominent in more conservative parts of Japan, like West Japan, and based on this sort of particular spat of publicity, saying that schools who have these rules must have them because the people who decide the rules are a bunch of perverts who want to get off. That seemed to be what did the trick. A lot of the schools said, let's change that school rule that we can inspect all the children's underwear. Thank heavens. I mean, again, I'm in Tokyo, and I don't profess to have a deep knowledge of the whole school system here, but you see these stories come out now and again. Of course, the hair color one is a classic one because you have mixed heritage kids. Even Japanese kids occasionally will have curly hair or brown hair. It still happens, like light colored hair. And the school rules that all hair has to be black. The crazy stories that used to get back in the 90s, that even like exchange students from Australia, like blonde exchange students, were like forced because someone looked at the school rules that said all students have to have black hair. They forced the exchange students to dye their hair black so that they would appear the same as the Japanese kids. Can you imagine? Baby steps. These rules are now, they draw attention. Things like the hair color thing, when they come up, they are rare, but they still come up. But good to see that, again, 100 years too late, but it's good to see progress being made. So, progress. Back into the comments. Dan H., a silly question not related to Japan. Out of the Kiwis and the Welsh, which country has the most amount of sheep shaggers? I always find when I get asked questions like that, it's useful to, particularly because I get that mostly from Australian friends, I tend to divert the conversation towards Tasmanians. And that always works. Australians, the only thing that can top sheep shagging is they can be easily distracted by incest jokes. I don't know. I mean, look, I suppose in Wales they take what they can get, but the thing is as well, New Zealand's become much less sheep oriented over the years. It was a point of pride. I remember in Australia, like as a kid, I was moving in both countries. I remember a teacher talking about how Australia has the finest quality wool of any in the world. The merino sheep in Australia, famous for having the highest quality wool. And I was 8 years old, and my father was in the New Zealand Army, so I was kind of raised to be a little bit of a nationalist New Zealander, and all I knew was that we had the best sheep, and I'm sure in every way, if this answers your question. And I remember getting into a loud fight with my teacher, with my Australian teacher at my Australian school, saying that, no, sir, I'm pretty sure New Zealand has the best sheep. And he's like, no, well, New Zealand is very famous. They have very good sheep over there, but actually the very best sheep, the merino sheep that we have here in Australia, actually the world's best. And I'm like, no, so that is completely wrong. I think so I would suspect that we would generate the image that probably we have the most. Certainly in the South Island there are occasional news stories with that, but there again, I mean, the Welsh, they just take what they can get, right? Judging by the way they play rugby, I would say I doubt that they could catch the sheep very well anymore. I guess that's the thing. Richie McCaw practiced on sheep. I talked far too long about that. AV84K, we need Chris Hansen at these schools. I'm not registering Chris Hansen at the moment. I'm sure I don't want to. 5 minutes left, says Aaron. Okay, I'm going to do that thing where all the last few stories are going to be too fast and they're going to be interesting. And I'm going to be like, yeah. Mochi Girl, did you miss it all? No, you're about to get the rapid fire final 5 minutes. Maybe that's what you should call it, Aaron. You should call it except it's always 15 minutes instead of 5. And I'm still talking. I'm jabbering. I'm just wasting time right now. But rapid fire. No, Mochi Girl, you came for danger round. So there you go. Mr. Kordychev. The best sheep sounds weird. Believe me, if you grew up in New Zealand in the 1980s, those are fighting words. Saying that another country is better sheep than us. So how do we do this? I'm just thinking I could talk about this next story for like 3 to 5 minutes. It'll be a 2 minute. This will be too short. Anyway, I'm gonna get a rapid fire. Here we go. So the Japanese government, I've talked a lot about the apprentice visa scheme, the scheme to basically have low-wage laborers come to Japan and work in farms and factories and so on, taking jobs that basically, without which these companies would not be able to compete anymore for lack of people and for wages being too high. Effectively, these are jobs where people are paid below minimum wage because they are accepting apprenticeship training, but that apprenticeship training is basically, like shucking oyster shells or just basically doing repetitive manual work. And there are lots of Vietnamese people, actually just about more Vietnamese now than Chinese. There have been huge numbers of Vietnamese that have come into Japan in the last 5 years, many on the scheme, and they're often introduced to Japan via these sort of introduction agencies. If you want to get some Vietnamese workers for your farm or whatever, there are these companies that advertise, hey, we'll supply you with some cheap Vietnamese workers. And these companies are very adept at navigating the immigration process. So they're basically like introductory agents. And 5 of the biggest of these have been delisted as approved to handle the immigration procedures of Vietnamese coming in on apprentice visas because they have produced too many runaways. There are too many Vietnamese workers who have come in to these places and have disappeared after coming into Japan and starting work. And so the Japanese government, rather than looking into why the below minimum wage indentured laborers who are coming to Japan are running away, they're looking at this as a problem that the companies that are trading the people to them are producing too many runaways. And so they are removing their accreditation until they can get more reliable low-wage laborers who won't run away so much. It's the optics of this are just not good, and the fact that because the system is run by the Ministry of Justice, they look at this as the crime of being a runaway low-wage laborer. And bear in mind, when you ask them, the coverage of this is that half the reason that they run away is that they weren't being paid, and in fact sometimes their passports were taken away and they were being locked in their dormitory accommodations and whatnot. They were literally being treated like, there are cases where the worker abuse was to the point of imprisoning them and not paying them. And I don't know what you call that, but again, having too many of those people run away, and the result is that you punish the traders. I mean, Yeah, this visa system has so many problems with it, and again, this is almost a joke that they're not looking into why people are running away. They're just treating the fact that people have run away as the crime is a problem that needs to be addressed. Good night, Andrea. Gonna rush through. Oh, I've got so many more stories to talk about. Okay. Yeah, this is totally gonna go another 10 minutes. Okay, well, let's do this. Cars. Going to talk about cars for a moment. That thing is crazy. That got announced. The Tesla Model S can go from 0 to 60, 100 kilometers per hour in like 1.96. I think they've been able to do it. By all accounts, when you drive in this, like, you basically need a helmet. If you do not have your head like attached to the headrest, the car will effectively punch you really hard in the back of the head. It's actually, people who talk about like Teslas on performance mode, like ludicrous mode, accelerating, it's not like a fun acceleration. It's like actually being catapulted, like from a catapult. It's actually physically painful and jarring, and I suspect that someone's going to get knocked out from the jolt from accelerating in these. Do I want to drive one? Hell yes. I mean, this is like faster than a Bugatti. Like, this is faster than a $5 million car, and you can buy it for $100,000. You know, I'm sure these are going to pop up in rentals and stuff like that. Hell yeah, I want to drive one of these. It is funny how for all of my life, the idea that you always measure the latest hypercar by what their 0 to 100 time is. And, you know, they got from, you know, for 5 seconds to 3 seconds to, you know, these crazy cars that could get under 3 seconds in the last few years. 1.9 seconds, it's almost like, okay, let's just stop now. Like, it's honestly getting silly at the point that it's 1.9 seconds. Those are cool. Electric cars are just making, honestly, gasoline cars look ridiculous. And Nissan got the memo. The GTR, one of the greatest cars ever made, they're not making it anymore. And I must admit, I suppose it's on one hand it's sad. On the other hand, you know, again, performance cars are totally being redefined by electrics, and not just by the performance, but also look at the shape of the car. It's got that big bump on the front of the car. That, of course, is how we define cars. That's where the engine goes. But with electric cars, you put the motors right on the wheels. And the battery components can be put anywhere. They can be put in the pillars, they can be put in the doors. So essentially, you don't actually need to design the car around having a massive boot, you know, or a trunk, or an engine bay anymore. So you can actually, and I must admit, you know, like, probably makes sense. And when you add to that, the upcoming cars are going to be self-driving and whatnot, you know, yeah, I think it's actually really exciting to consider. We're getting rid of sedans because that shape is not necessary anymore, right? The same way that people use SUVs because they've got the massive back, but also you don't even need the front anymore. I mean, I think you could just get boxes, just because it's the most efficient thing. Well, I think that cars are about to get really, really crazy and cool. And another way that they're going to get really, really cool is that Japan that is not cool, by the way. But what is cool about that car is that I know about this. This has been happening in Japan for like 20 years now. The government's been funding research into putting coils into roads, which will charge cars while they drive on them. So your EV, basically. And I've heard there's Israeli companies and so on that are doing this in Europe right now as well. You have a small battery in your car, and basically your car will just constantly charge. You won't have to charge it up anywhere. You'll have unlimited range because the main roads and highways and so on will have charging coils under the roads. So basically you'll be able to charge as you go. You won't need as big a battery, which means that the car will be lighter and have a better performance. And yeah, Japan's looking seriously at building the sort of infrastructure to allow EVs to charge as they run. The other type of infrastructure that they're building, of course, is hydrogen infrastructure, which I talk about a lot on here. But the fact that Honda is working with JAXA to talk about not only, and this is again why I really love hydrogen. It's not just the fact that it's you can store it forever. It's energy dense. You can create it anywhere that you have water and electricity available to generate more of it. But yeah, you can actually create it easily on the moon. You can create it on Mars. You know, basically you can use it to fuel rockets, electricity. You can get water as a byproduct that you can drink. And oxygen is a byproduct which you can breathe. So the idea of living on the moon and places like that, which I'm hoping starts happening seriously in my lifetime, is going to basically rely on the same sort of technology for hydrogen fuel extraction and hydrogen fuel cell production. And Honda, which is making hydrogen fueled cars, is working with the space agency to start actually setting up infrastructure that they'll be able to put on the moon to be able to generate oxygen, water, and electricity from the ice that's already on the moon. That's hella cool, and that's connected with the cars, and that's also energy, unlimited electricity that you can have that's carbon free, you know, if you get it from green hydrogen. As of today, Japan still generates 32% of its electricity from coal. That number was really, really low before they had to shut down all the nuclear power plants after the Fukushima accident. But of course, this is a disaster right now. Right now, Japan, nearly 70% of electricity is from fossil fuels. And nuclear, made up 30 to 40% of that. And as terrible as the accident was, we need it back at least until we have the ability to generate all the energy needs in other ways that don't increase carbon. But hydrogen is the best thing for it. And this is where at the moment, because of government incentives, they've been putting wind power and solar power all over the country. But the problem is the way that power generation works, particularly for renewables right now, is that it's really hard to store really, really big volumes of electricity. Even batteries are not that great and they don't scale that well. And so these things are hooked up to the grid, but the grid will only take as much electricity as it needs in a given moment. And the problem with solar and wind is that, it changes. Clouds come, winds change. So, it means that excess generation is just like skipped and doesn't go into the grid at all and is just wasted. And, under generation, you need to complement with other sources to make sure you get the right balanced load. And again, this is what I love about hydrogen, is that you can actually, if you hook up hydrogen generation, you can use excess solar and wind generation to actually generate hydrogen out of the water that's around sites like this, and you can store that on site and use that as electricity wherever it's needed. So it's really, really cool. And the fact that in Australia, again, the Japanese government's just investing tons of money in this, because although right now most hydrogen comes from hydrocarbons, it comes from coal and petrol and gas and that sort of stuff, it's the cheapest way to get it right now. They're called hydrocarbons. They're carbons combined with hydrogen, and it's basically what all of our cars currently run on, and you can actually extract the hydrogen from that. You have to capture the carbon and make sure it doesn't get released into the air or anything like that, so it's messy and dirty, but it works with existing petroleum infrastructure. But the Japanese government, of course, while they're investing in that, like they're okay to have that, just to have enough hydrogen to start up the hydrogen economy. The Japanese government wants green hydrogen that's developed from electrolysis with water. That's hydrogen taken out of water, because if you have that, then Japan doesn't need to import. It's not dependent on other countries for its energy resources anymore. It can do it all from within Japan. So it's investing like crazy in technologies to enable green hydrogen, which is hydrogen generated from renewable energy. And they're doing this in Australia right now, which has a lot of carbon-based hydrocarbons as well. And they've figured out a way already to slash cost by 2/3 to extract it. If that's true, again, this is something which, one, they can do on a huge scale in Australia from photovoltaics and from, wind and so on, but they'll also be able to do it in Japan in time. And that is just super cool, like looking ahead to the future. And this is where the Japanese government is also investing a ton of money, not only on switching from fax machines to, digital, cloud and IT-based technology. They're doing a lot of strategic investments in that field. They're also doing that on things like this, on green environmental technology. And I actually think the way that the Japanese government is doing this, and America's kind of abandoned this. They talk about it, and we'll see under the current administration if it changes. But they've kind of given up. Look at, you hear about the quality of infrastructure in America, bridges falling apart, roads falling apart, power lines that need replacing and that are vulnerable to solar flares and so on, Americans find it hard to pay taxes to invest in infrastructure. Japan, they actually do invest, and they plan strategically around this, and I think it means that it's going to be really cool in Japan. So really excited about this sort of news, even though it means we're losing the skyline. That Tesla is crazy. I would totally drive one of those. Saint and Sir, good to see you. I'm going to quickly say hello to a couple of people, and then I'll do the last couple of stories super rapid fire. Heated roads seems crazy, but it's a reality. Tim the Asian Egg, good to see you. Christopher Luke, good to see you. Mr. Cordy Chep, good to see you. Lysander 45, good to see you. And all the other people. What happens when roads get dirty or dusty? Well, the point is that the coils are under the road. So it's like, wireless charging, that you'll be able to have them under so you'll have to rip up the roads to put the coils in. But, they'll be protected by the asphalt is the idea. Anyway, that's as I understand it. But yes, and Mochigo, good to see you. Final stories. The Minister of Justice, former Minister of Justice, who pledged to reform the justice system, is going on a 3-year undercover assignment to study the justice system from the inside after being imprisoned for buying votes. Not a good look. And thank you, Aaron, for editing these awesome videos and all the other ones this week. I really, really appreciate it. I hope these videos are editable for you this week. I'm exactly 10 minutes over as always. I'm consistently bad. There we go. Ami Yamato just tweeted about me. Ami Yamato, you should check out our collaboration videos. I was first. I think I was the first person to collaborate with her. Actually, I claim that one. She is awesome. I'm going to go and check my Twitter about that. Thank you for pointing that out, Mochi Girl. And Kerberos Tenshi, good to see you. Hey everyone, that's the show. It's a wrap. Hope you all have a good week. You know, get vaccinated, stay safe, take care of your families. I'm optimistic. I'm always optimistic. I'm that sort of a person. But, you know, seeing that line going like that and knowing that it's about to get higher because I'm going to get on the next jump of that line for the vaccinations and stuff like that. Yeah, finally, a year and a half, we can finally see a way out of this, or somewhat of a way out of this. I don't know how if it's ever going to be fully back to normal. But I'm really, really optimistic right now. The Olympics is dumb, but they're going to happen. So, yeah, let's look forward to that. I guess I'm going to be talking about that. You know, alcohol and no condoms and everything. That's going to go really well. You know, what else? I will keep, you can keep up with what I'm doing on Twitter. You can see me jogging. You can see my Instagram feeds of the photos I take whenever I run, including today. Show you the life I see in Tokyo outside of this room if you're interested. Really appreciate once again all the short videos that just make everything more accessible. Thank you, Aaron, for doing that all the time and for moderating. I really, really appreciate it. Sainted Sir, good to see you. Have a good week yourself. Christopher Luke, no expectations, but you know what? That's probably the best way to be. Mr. Quiddy Chip, look, I had no expectations for vaccinations until 2 weeks ago, and then all of a sudden it's going to happen. So, you know, you never know. It can happen that way. Thanks, everybody. And take good care of yourself and your families. Have a good one. Happy Father's Day to all the dads. And boom, peace. Kakitiano. Ollie Olsen. See you later. End stream button. Confirm end stream. See you later. Have a good week.